The rusty mining facility on Outpost Delta 7 groaned under the assault of another dust storm. Thomas Rivers wiped the sweat from his forehead as he calibrated the atmospheric filters, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision across the ancient control panel. 3 years of self-imposed exile had taught him every creak and whisper of this lonely outpost, perched on the edge of human space. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk," he muttered, coaxing the failing system back to life. The facility's recyclers wheezed in protest, but gradually the air began to clear. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. Out here, every victory counted, no matter how small. He didn't choose this desolate rock for its charm. Delta 7 was perfect precisely because nobody else wanted it, a forgotten waypoint between more important worlds. The perfect place for a man trying to disappear. The facility's proximity alarm shattered his contemplation. Thomas frowned at the display. In 3 years, he'd never had an unscheduled visitor. The scanner showed a small ship, sleek and predatory, touching down just beyond the facility's perimeter. "Security protocol engaged," the facility's AI announced in its monotone voice. "Unknown vessel detected. Design matches Selenian registry." Thomas felt his blood run cold. The Selenians were an advanced species known for their strict adherence to law and order, and their elite warriors. He grabbed his old service pistol from its hiding place beneath the console. Whatever brought a Selenian ship to his doorstep, it couldn't be good. The main airlock cycled, and Thomas spun around, weapon raised. Through the reinforced glass, he saw a tall figure in gleaming armor that seemed to ripple like liquid metal. The helmet retracted, revealing distinctly feminine features, silvery skin, iridescent eyes, and hair that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Thomas Rivers, the Selenian warrior, spoke, her voice carrying both authority and an unexpected note of uncertainty. "I am Naira Valthor, Enforcer First Class. You are accused of stealing classified technology from the Selenian Science Academy." Thomas kept his weapon steady, even as his mind raced. There must be some mistake. "I haven't left this facility in 3 years. Naira's eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right through him. "Our intelligence is rarely wrong, Mr. Rivers. The theft occurred 5 years ago, before your disappearance. 5 years ago, I was designing atmospheric systems for colony ships," Thomas replied, slowly lowering his weapon. "I've never even been to Selenia." Something flickered across Naira's face, doubt, perhaps? She raised her hand, projecting a holographic display. "These schematics were found in a raid on a smuggling operation. They bear your signature algorithm." Thomas stepped closer, squinting at the familiar lines of code. "That's impossible. Those designs were classified. They never left Earth's secure servers." He looked up at Naira, realization dawning. "Someone's gone to a lot of trouble to frame me." The Selenian warrior's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "You claim innocence, yet you fled to this remote outpost. Why?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "Would you believe I came here to protect people?" At her questioning look, he continued, "My atmospheric systems were being modified for military applications. When I refused to cooperate, things got complicated. I chose exile over compromise." Naira studied him for a long moment, her iridescent eyes unblinking. "You abandoned a successful career to preserve your principles?" "Some things are worth more than success," Thomas replied quietly. The facility's lights flickered as another dust storm approached. Naira glanced at the weakening shields, then back at Thomas. "Your atmospheric systems are failing. They're old. Everything here is old. But I keep it running." "Show me," she commanded, but her tone had softened slightly. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. As he led her through the facility, explaining the jury-rigged systems and makeshift repairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything. He didn't know if Naira believed his innocence, but something in her manner had shifted from hunter to observer. As they reached the main control room, the storm hit with full force. The shields strained against the onslaught, and warning lights began to flash across the console. Thomas immediately moved to adjust the power distribution, his hands flying over the controls. "This is more than simple maintenance," Naira observed, watching him work. "You've modified these systems extensively." "Had to," Thomas grunted, fighting to stabilize the shields. "Original equipment wasn't designed for storms this severe. Either adapt or die out here." Naira stepped closer, her armor humming faintly. "Your innovations, they're remarkable. Similar to the principles in those stolen schematics, but more elegant. More human." The shield stabilized, and Thomas turned to face her. "That's because they're mine. The original designs, before they were weaponized. This is what they were meant for, protecting life, not taking it." For the first time, Naira smiled, a small gesture, but genuine. "Perhaps, Mr. Rivers, we should discuss exactly who might benefit from framing you for this theft." The storm raged outside, but inside the control room, something shifted between hunter and quarry. As Thomas began to explain his suspicions, he realized that sometimes the most unlikely circumstances could forge the strongest alliances. The holographic display bathed the control room in an ethereal blue glow as Thomas and Naira pored over the stolen schematics. Outside, the dust storm had subsided to a dull roar, but tension still crackled in the recycled air of the facility. There, Thomas pointed to a section of code, his finger tracing the elegant mathematical patterns. "See how the power distribution algorithms have been modified? They've turned my atmospheric regulators into weapon delivery systems." Naira leaned closer, her iridescent eyes reflecting the holographic light. "The alterations are subtle. Without intimate knowledge of the original design, one would never notice." "Exactly," Thomas ran a hand through his graying hair. "Whoever did this knew my work inside and out. They didn't just steal it, they perverted its entire purpose." "Your reaction to this discovery is enlightening," Naira observed, studying his face. "Most beings accused of weapons trafficking attempt to negotiate or flee. You appear genuinely offended by the modifications themselves." Thomas met her gaze. "Because I spent my life trying to help people survive on hostile worlds. These systems were meant to shield colonies from toxic atmospheres, not deliver biological agents through them." Naira's hand moved to her communicator, then hesitated. "My superiors expect regular updates. They will want to know why I haven't yet taken you into custody." "And what will you tell them?" "That the situation is more complex than initially reported." She straightened, her armor shifting like liquid metal. "But they will demand evidence of your innocence." Thomas walked to a dusty storage unit and pulled out a worn data crystal. "Maybe this will help. It's my original research logs, documenting every step of the system's development. Including the day I discovered what they planned to do with it." As he inserted the crystal into the console, the holographic display flickered to life with new data. Video logs showed a younger Thomas working in a pristine Earth laboratory, his enthusiasm evident as he refined the atmospheric regulation technology. "Wait," Naira commanded suddenly. "Freeze that frame." The image paused, showing a figure in the background of the lab. Though partially obscured, their features were just visible enough to be familiar. "You know them?" Thomas asked, noting the recognition in Naira's expression. "Director Ven Krell," she replied, her voice tight. "He oversees weapons research for the Selenian Military Council. He has no business being in an Earth facility 5 years ago." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. The military contracts didn't start until months after that recording. Officially, at least. Naira's fingers danced across the holographic interface, cross-referencing dates and locations. Krell's presence suggests Selenian involvement far earlier than reported. This could implicate members of my own government. Making me an easy scapegoat, Thomas added grimly. A human exile wouldn't dare challenge accusations from the Selenian Empire. The facility's lights dimmed momentarily as the backup generators kicked in. Thomas moved to check the systems, but Naira caught his arm, her grip firm but not threatening. "We are both in danger," she stated, her eyes intense. "If Krell discovers I've found this evidence." "He won't," Thomas assured her. "Living off-grid has its advantages. This facility's communications are completely isolated. No one can monitor our discoveries." Naira released his arm but remained close. "You've survived here alone for 3 years. That shows considerable resourcefulness." "Necessary resourcefulness," Thomas corrected, allowing himself a small smile. "Though I have to admit, having company is a nice change. Even if that company initially came to arrest me." A faint color touched Naira's silvery cheeks. "Your humor is unexpected. Most humans I've encountered in official capacity tend toward fear or hostility." "Well, most humans probably didn't have the pleasure of being hunted by such a thorough investigator," Thomas replied, then grew serious. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Naira's expression hardened. "Director Krell's influence runs deep within the Selenian hierarchy. We need irrefutable proof of his involvement in the weapons program." "And of my innocence? That may prove easier than exposing a conspiracy within my government." She gestured to the data crystal. "Your logs provide a foundation, but we need more. There must be a trail connecting Krell to the stolen schematics." Thomas turned back to the console, fingers flying over the controls. "The modifications to my original code, they'd require significant computing power and specialized knowledge of both human and Selenian technology. Few facilities possess such capabilities," Naira added, following his logic. "And fewer still would have access to both our world's classified research." As they worked, the space between them seemed to shrink, their earlier adversarial relationship evolving into something more complex. Thomas found himself stealing glances at the Selenian warrior, admiring the grace with which she analyzed data and formed connections. Naira, too, seemed to view him differently now. Her initial suspicion had given way to professional respect, perhaps even the beginnings of trust. She moved around his workspace with increasing comfort, adapting to his human methods of investigation. A warning light on the console interrupted their work. Thomas frowned at the readings. "We've got company." Long-range sensors picked up a ship entering the system. Naira's posture tensed. "Military configuration? Can't tell yet. But given what we've discovered, we must assume we've been compromised," Naira finished. She drew her weapon, its energy core humming to life. "How secure is this facility?" Thomas was already moving, activating defensive protocols he'd hoped never to use. "Secure enough to buy us time. But if that's Krell's forces, we'll need more than time. Then we'll make our own advantage," Naira declared, her warriors' training evident in every movement. "Your knowledge of the facility combined with my combat experience, they won't expect us to work together." As they prepared for the approaching threat, Thomas realized that his lonely exile had led to something unprecedented, a partnership between human and Selenian, united against corruption that threatened both their peoples. The real question was whether they could survive long enough to expose the truth. The approaching ship cast a menacing shadow over Delta 7's barren landscape. Thomas worked feverishly at the facility's controls, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces as he fortified their defenses. Beside him, Naira's armor hummed with combat protocols engaging, her presence both reassuring and electric. "Security scans confirm it's a Selenian military vessel," Thomas reported, eyes fixed on the readouts. "Heavy weapons complement, crew of at least 20. Krell's personal strike team." Naira's voice was tight with recognition. "They're known for their efficiency, and their discretion. Thomas glanced at her. You mean they make problems disappear? Precisely. Naira activated her armor's advanced scanning systems. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they breach the perimeter. What defenses does this facility possess? A grim smile crossed Thomas's face as he initiated a sequence of commands. More than they'll expect. I didn't spend 3 years here just tinkering with atmospheric systems. The facility's lights dimmed momentarily as hidden defense turrets emerged from concealed ports around the perimeter. Reinforced blast shields descended over vulnerable sections, and emergency force fields flickered to life. Impressive, Naira admitted, but it won't hold them forever. It doesn't need to. Thomas pulled up a schematic of the facility. There's an old mining tunnel network beneath us. Most are collapsed, but I've maintained a few emergency routes. If we can download the evidence and reach the secondary control center, we might be able to transmit everything to both our governments before they stop us. The facility shuddered as the first warning shots struck the outer shields. Naira moved closer to Thomas, her weapon ready. You understand that if we succeed, this goes beyond just clearing your name. We'll be exposing corruption at the highest levels of Selenian government. Having second thoughts? Naira's iridescent eyes met his, fierce with determination. No. Justice matters more than blind loyalty. My father taught me that before he died defending our principles. Another impact rocked the facility. Warning lights flashed across the console as the outer defenses began to fail. Thomas quickly transferred critical data to a portable drive, then handed Naira a spare environmental suit. The tunnels aren't pressurized, he explained. And some sections might be unstable. You trust me enough to show me your escape route? Naira asked, accepting the suit. At this point, I trust you more than most humans I've known. Thomas checked his weapon. Ready? They moved swiftly through the facility's corridors, Thomas leading them through a maze of maintenance shafts and backup systems. Above, they could hear the sounds of Krell's forces beginning their assault on the main entrance. They're using plasma cutters on the outer doors, Naira observed. We have minutes at most. Thomas pressed his hand against a hidden panel, revealing a narrow passage. Down here. Watch your step, parts of these tunnels are older than both our civilizations. They descended into darkness, their way lit only by emergency strips and the glow of Naira's armor. The air grew thicker with dust and the weight of centuries. Their footsteps echoed off ancient rock walls, mixing with the distant rumble of explosions above. The secondary control center is about half a kilometer ahead, Thomas whispered. Assuming the tunnels haven't collapsed since my last inspection. Movement behind us, Naira warned, her enhanced senses detecting what human ears couldn't. They've found the passage. They quickened their pace, but the uneven terrain made speed dangerous. A wrong step could mean a broken ankle, or worse. The tunnel forked ahead, and Thomas hesitated. Left, Naira said suddenly. The right tunnel has recent disturbance patterns. They may have planted explosives, anticipating this route. Thomas nodded, impressed by her tactical analysis. They turned left just as weapons fire erupted behind them, energy bolts scorching the rock where they'd stood moments before. They're trying to hurt us, Naira observed grimly. These aren't ordinary soldiers, they're moving with too much precision. Good thing we're not ordinary fugitives, Thomas replied. He pulled a small device from his pocket and tossed it behind them. Seconds later, an electromagnetic pulse rippled through the tunnel, followed by cursing in Selenian. That will disable their targeting systems temporarily, he explained. And possibly their communications. They reached a massive door set into the rock face. Thomas quickly entered a code, and the ancient mechanisms groaned to life. Inside was a smaller version of the main control center, its systems powered down but intact. We need 5 minutes to power up and transmit, Thomas said, moving to the controls. Can you buy us that time? Naira took up a defensive position, her weapon humming with deadly energy. I'll give you 10. As Thomas worked to establish a secure transmission, Naira held the line against their pursuers. Her combat skills were magnificent to behold, each movement precise, each shot calculated. She wasn't just fighting, she was orchestrating a defense that made their opponents pay dearly for every meter gained. Transmission commencing, Thomas announced. 60 seconds to completion. An explosion rocked the chamber, showering them with debris. Through the dust emerged a tall figure in ornate combat armor, Director Krell himself, flanked by his elite guards. Enforcer Valthor, Krell's voice was cold with disappointment. Your father would be ashamed to see you betraying your own people for a human criminal. My father died fighting corruption like yours, Naira replied, her weapon unwavering. He would be proud to see me continuing his work. Transmission at 80%, Thomas reported quietly. Krell's forces spread out, weapons trained on both of them. Your deaths will be recorded as a tragic accident. The human resisted arrest, and you were caught in the crossfire. A regrettable loss. The only regrettable thing, Naira said, is how long you've betrayed everything our people stand for. The tension in the chamber reached its breaking point. Thomas watched the transmission counter tick upward as sweat beaded on his forehead. Everything hinged on the next few seconds, their lives, their truth, and perhaps the future of human-Selenian relations. The chamber erupted into chaos just as the transmission hit 100%. Energy weapons filled the chamber with deadly light as Krell's forces opened fire. Naira moved with incredible speed, her armor's shields deflecting the initial barrage while she pulled Thomas behind a fallen support beam. The transmission? She asked, returning fire with precise bursts. Complete, Thomas confirmed, checking his portable display. But we're cut off from confirming receipt. They might have blocked the signal. Krell's laughter echoed through the chaos. Your persistence is admirable, if futile. Did you really think we wouldn't monitor all communications from this sector? Thomas met Naira's eyes, seeing his own determination reflected in their iridescent depths. He's bluffing, Thomas whispered. The transmission used quantum-encrypted channels. Even the Selenian military can't block those completely. Then we just need to survive long enough for the right people to act on it, Naira replied, her shoulder brushing against his as she reloaded her weapon. The air grew thick with ozone and dust as the firefight intensified. Thomas activated his final defense protocol, and hidden turrets emerged from the chamber walls, catching several of Krell's soldiers in crossfire. Impressive engineering, Naira commented, using the distraction to eliminate 2 more attackers. You've been preparing for something like this. Let's just say I've learned not to trust coincidences, Thomas replied, working to bypass a damaged control panel. There's an emergency shaft behind that far wall. If I can override the locks. An explosion rocked the chamber, sending them stumbling. Krell emerged through the smoke, his advanced armor making him seem more machine than being. Enough of this chase. Surrender now, and I might be persuaded to make your deaths quick. Like you did with my father? Naira's voice carried years of buried pain. He discovered your weapons program too, didn't he? That's why he had to die in that accident. Krell's posture shifted slightly. Sentinel Valthor was a fool who couldn't see the bigger picture. Just like his daughter. The bigger picture? Thomas stood, despite Naira's warning gesture. You stole my work, twisted it into weapons, and murdered anyone who got in your way. All while probably profiting from both sides. Profit? Krell laughed. You think too small, human. This is about power, the power to shape the future of both our species. Your atmospheric technology, modified correctly, could make entire planets uninhabitable in hours. The perfect deterrent. Or the perfect weapon of mass murder, Naira countered, moving to stand beside Thomas. Their shoulders touched, a silent communication of trust. Call it what you will, Krell raised his weapon. But your interference ends now. Time seemed to slow. Thomas saw Krell's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Naira beginning to move to shield him. Without thinking, he grabbed her arm and pulled her down, just as a massive explosion tore through the ceiling above them. Through the falling debris came the distinctive sound of military drop ships. But these weren't Selenian, the engine signature was unmistakably human. No. Krell's shock was visible even through his armor. How? Quantum encryption works both ways, Thomas managed a grim smile. And I had 3 years to make friends in interesting places. The chamber erupted into chaos as Earth Special Forces repelled through the breach, their advanced weapons immediately engaging Krell's remaining soldiers. In the confusion, Krell himself turned to flee, but Naira was faster. She launched herself at him with incredible speed, her combat training combined with personal vengeance making her nearly unstoppable. Their armored forms crashed together in a brutal display of advanced technology and tactical skill. Thomas wanted to help, but he had his own problems. 2 of Krell's loyal guards had cornered him behind a fallen column. He counted his remaining ammunition, 3 shots. Not enough. Then he noticed something else, a familiar hum in the facility's walls. The atmospheric systems were still running, still under his control. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. Naira, he shouted over the battle. Seal your armor. She disengaged from Krell just long enough to acknowledge. Thomas didn't waste time explaining, he immediately initiated an emergency purge of the facility's air supply. The effect was instantaneous. The unprepared soldiers stumbled as their lungs fought for oxygen. Even Krell's advanced armor showed signs of strain against the sudden pressure change. But Thomas and Naira, in their sealed environmental suits, pressed their advantage. Working in perfect synchronization, they drove Krell back. Each of them anticipated the other's moves as if they'd fought together for years instead of hours. It was a dance of survival, of justice, of 2 beings from different worlds united by a common cause. But Krell hadn't become director through weakness. Even cornered, he was lethal. A lucky shot caught Thomas in the leg, sending him sprawling. Naira's cry of concern was cut short as Krell slammed her against a wall, his armor's enhanced strength crushing her defenses. You could have had everything, Krell snarled at her. Power, position, the future of our people. Instead, you throw it away for what? A human's conscience? Naira's response was defiant. For truth. For justice. For my father. She activated something on her armor. And for this. Her suit began to glow with building energy, she was overloading its core. Krell realized too late what she planned. The explosion would kill them both. Thomas, despite his injured leg, moved with desperate speed. He had seconds to choose, and no choice at all. He grabbed a fallen weapon, ignoring the searing pain, and fired at the exact spot where Naira's armor joined at the neck. The impact knocked her free from Krell's grasp just as her armor detonated. The explosion caught Krell full force, while Naira was thrown clear. Thomas caught her, both of them tumbling to safety as the chamber filled with blinding light. When the smoke cleared, Krell lay motionless, his prized armor finally breached. Earth Special Forces secured the room, but Thomas barely noticed. He was focused entirely on Naira, cradling her head as her eyes flickered open. That, she coughed, was either brilliant or incredibly stupid. I've been called worse, Thomas managed a weak smile. Though usually not by someone who just tried to blow themselves up to stop a corrupt official. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. They had started as hunter and quarry, become allies of necessity, and now they were something else entirely. The sound of approaching medics broke the moment. As they were both helped to their feet, Thomas couldn't help but ask, "So, still planning to arrest me?" Naira's laugh, though pained, was genuine. I think we can negotiate alternative arrangements. The medical bay of the Earth Special Forces vessel hummed with quiet efficiency as Thomas watched the stars streak past the viewport. His injured leg was almost healed thanks to advanced regeneration technology, but the doctors insisted he remain under observation. At least they'd given him a room with a view. The door slid open, and Naira entered. She'd traded her battle-damaged armor for a simple Selenian uniform, but she moved with the same fluid grace that had first caught his attention days ago. The iridescent patterns beneath her silvery skin seemed to shimmer in the starlight. The Joint Task Force has finished their preliminary investigation, she announced, taking a seat beside his bed. They found enough evidence in Krell's personal files to implicate his entire network. The weapons program has been shut down. And my name? A rare smile crossed her face. Officially cleared of all charges. In fact, both governments are rather embarrassed about the whole situation. They're offering you a full reinstatement, with honors. Thomas snorted. I'm sure they are. Nothing like a scandal to make bureaucrats generous. He studied her expression. What about you? Any fallout from helping a suspected criminal? Quite the opposite. Naira's eyes held a hint of amusement. They're calling me a hero for uncovering the conspiracy. There's talk of promotion to special investigator. My father's old position. He would be proud, Thomas said softly, watching as something vulnerable flickered across her features. Yes, she agreed, then hesitated. Though I find myself questioning whether I want to continue in enforcement work. Recent events have shifted my perspective. Thomas sat up straighter, intrigued. Oh? And what perspective would that be? That perhaps the most important work happens not in hunting criminals, but in building bridges. She met his gaze directly. The fact that a human and a Selenian could work together so effectively has not gone unnoticed by either government. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? The Science Council is proposing a joint research initiative, Naira explained. Combining human innovation with Selenian technology to develop defensive systems for vulnerable colonies. They need someone who understands both worlds to oversee it. Someone like you? Someone like us. Her hand found his, the touch sending an electric current through his body. Your atmospheric systems were revolutionary because you thought differently than Selenian engineers. Imagine what we could accomplish together, officially this time. Thomas looked down at their joined hands, human and Selenian, so different yet fitting together perfectly. It would mean leaving Delta 7. You've hidden long enough, Naira said gently. The truth is out. Your name is cleared. Maybe it's time to build something new. The stars continued their dance outside the viewport as Thomas considered her words. 3 years ago, he'd chosen exile to protect his principles. Now, fate had given him a chance not just to return, but to create something meaningful. You know, he said finally, for someone who came to arrest me, you're making a very compelling job offer. Is that a yes? Thomas squeezed her hand. On one condition, we do this as equals. No rank, no hierarchy. Just two people trying to make the galaxy a better place. Agreed. Naira's smile brightened the room more than the starlight. Though I should warn you, I'm still technically your arresting officer until the paperwork clears. Is that so? Thomas grinned. Planning to keep me in custody, Officer Valthor? Perhaps. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. For a very long time. As their lips met, Thomas reflected that some arrests turned out better than others. The lonely exile of Delta 7 had led him to something he never expected to find, not just redemption, but a partnership that transcended species and space itself. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, witnesses to a new chapter in human-Selenian relations. On paper, it would be recorded as a diplomatic breakthrough, a joining of technologies and cultures. But for Thomas and Naira, it was something simpler and more profound, proof that even in the darkest corners of space, light could bloom in unexpected ways. The ship's engines hummed as they set course for Earth, carrying its passengers toward a future neither of them could have imagined just days ago. Sometimes, Thomas realized, the best discoveries weren't found in laboratories or distant planets, but in the hearts brave enough to trust across the stars.